Today, we're going to talk about setting up new quizzes in Canvas. Canvas is getting ready to switch from classic quizzes to new quizzes, which is great. New quizzes has lots of new features. There's another video that you can watch that goes through each type of question that's available to create in new quizzes. But this is going to be just a generic, how do you get it set up? How do you get the questions out to students? As you're starting to think about your teacher-made exams for the end of the semester, there are several tips and tricks that you can use in Canvas to help make this a better experience for you and your students. First of all, I do recommend that you use Canvas's new quizzes feature. It is a little bit of a learning curve from the classic quizzes, but there's a lot of features in there that offer a lot more variety to the types of questions that you can add and the features that you have available to you as a teacher to make this a better experience for you and your students. So first of all, how do you get to new quizzes? I am someone that tends to build everything through modules. I always go to modules. I very rarely go to assignments or pages or quizzes. However, this is one time that you do have to go directly to quizzes. If I go to modules and create a quiz, it will automatically default to classic quizzes. So I'm going to go to the quizzes tab and click new quiz. And I'm going to choose new quizzes. You can default this to be what you use for all your future quizzes. However, I'm going to leave that blank for now. And I'm going to name my new quiz. I can decide how many points I want it to be. I can change this later if I want to. I'm going to leave it in assignment groups. And I'm going to grade on points, but you can change that however you want to. How many attempts do you want to allow students to have? I'm going to limit it to one attempt. If you want to change that, you can. And do you want to assign this to everyone? What's the due date? You can fill out all of that information. I'm going to click Save. So I do recommend that when you create questions that you put them in item banks. Item banks are just groupings of questions for a certain topic. So if I click on my item banks, you'll notice that I have item banks for multiple subjects. You're not going to need this. This is just because I've used these as examples. You're going to want to create your item banks based off what you teach. Now, your item banks follow you throughout all of your courses. They're tied to you, not to a certain course. So if you teach multiple preps, multiple courses, you want to make sure that you name your item banks appropriately. So if you teach world history and you also teach world history honors, you may want to name your item banks two different things. Also, you might want to be very specific. So if you teach U.S. history, you might want to say U.S. history honors Unit 1 Revolutionary War, or whatever it is that you're putting in there. You want to be very, very specific with the names of your item banks. Mine is not a good example because I don't teach different units like that, so I just threw in a bunch of examples for different subjects. But you want to be very specific with those item banks because it will follow you from course to course. It would be anytime you would give a quiz throughout the year. What is that quiz topic? If you're math, what is the type of questions that you're asking? What unit are you in? So I really think the item banks really should fall under like unit names. Just make sure you also put the course name on there so you know which course it is. So once you've created all the item banks, I can't really do anything in here. When I click, I can see the questions that I have, but I can't add new questions. So I'm actually going to go to my three dots and go to Manage Item Banks. I can here add new banks, and I can also click on the bank that I have, and I can add new questions from here also. So I really recommend that this is where you build a lot of your questions, especially for a final exam. However, you can build them directly from the main quiz page. You can just click the plus sign, and it gives you the option when you create a new question to put those questions in a certain item bank. Now, here's why this is going to be important. I had someone ask, can I build a bank of questions and then create my final exam so that I might have a bank of 100 questions, but I'm only going to give each student 50 questions, but I want those 50 questions to be random. So I want it to randomly pull 50 questions for each student from those 100 question item banks. Yes, you can do that. And that's where item banks come in important. So if you've created item banks for each unit of your course, then when it comes time for final exam, you can go in and just click item banks and start building your quiz. So this is how this works. So I'm going to click item banks. I've got a new quiz. I've got item banks. And maybe I want to do questions from my world history item bank. So I'm in art. So I'm going to go back and click item banks, and I'm going to go to world history. So from here, you can see I've got lots of questions in my world history item bank. From there, I'm going to click all of them. Okay, so I want it to use all of the questions, and it just added them over here. So I had 11 questions. Okay, so you could have 100, you can have whatever you want in there. So I clicked that I want to add 100 questions, or I want to add all of the questions in, and then I can click the pencil to edit, and I can tell it, but I want you to randomly select 5 questions out of those 11. I want you to give them 5 points each. Done. So here's my quiz. So out of those 11 questions, each student will get 5 random questions, and I can go from there. Now, if you have it set up as units, so this was just world history, that was pretty simple. But if you have multiple units within world history, you can continue to add those. So maybe now I want to add, and I don't have that, but I'll give another example. Maybe now I want to add in my U.S. history questions. I have 3 of them. So I want to add random, or add all. And then I'm going to click the pencil. So I only want 2 of these questions. So I want you to randomly select 2 out of those 3, give them 5 points each. Done. Okay. The next thing I want to do, so that's going to be questions 1 through 5 are going to come from world history, 6 and 7 from U.S. history. Maybe I'll add one more in. So now I want to add a random science question. I've got 2 of them, but I only want 1 science question mixed in. And so forth. So I can continue to add. And again, this would be an example for you. These would be different units of study that you're pulling questions from various units for your end of grade test. Okay, so once I've got all my questions in there, I can take this one step farther. So I've got the questions, I'm pulling random questions from different banks and mixing them all up. Now if I go to settings, I can mix it up even more. I want to shuffle the questions. So it's not going to have all of my world history questions at the top and then the U.S. history. It's going to mix them all amongst themselves. Then I want to also shuffle answers. And then, so those are 2 that I like. I do that for pretty much any quiz that I give. The rest of these are completely up to you. So you just have to think through, what do you want to allow? Do you want only one question at a time to come up on the screen so students aren't scrolling that infinite scroll? Sometimes it helps, especially if you have students that struggle with focusing. It's easier to have one question at a time. Sometimes students are annoyed by that if they're having to click back and forth. If you do one question at a time, you have the option to allow backtracking. If you do one question at a time and they answer question number 1 and then move on to question number 2, if I uncheck this, it won't let them go back to question number 1. They have to continue on and go through each question. So that does prevent some cheating in a way. You just have to decide if that's relevant for your course. Do you want students to be able to go back and double check answers, or once they've moved through the question, that's it? You do want to make sure you warn them of that if you set it up that way. Do you want them to have a student access code? You could go ahead and set this up, but they only get the code at a certain time. Maybe they have to log in live and get the code from you. I don't know that that's something you would want to do for the final exam, but it might be something that you use at some point. Do you want to allow a time limit? Again, this is another way to prevent some of that cheating. Do they only have an hour to answer these questions? What's their time limit? What are you going to give them? Also for math, a great option is allowing a calculator, and you have the options between basic and scientific. And then you've got allowing multiple attempts. If you want to do that, again, I wouldn't do that for an exam, but maybe you would want to do that for an essay or something else that they're working on. And then restricting their student result view, you can decide, do you want them to see their results after it's over? What kind of information do you want them to get when they are done with their quiz? So another great feature with new quizzes that you have is this moderate button. So I only have 1 student in my course right now, but if you had a lot of students, you would see all your students listed here. You would see the attempts that they had made on this quiz, their score, the time they spent. But what I really like is this moderate. So if I click moderate, I can actually give this student another attempt. So if something happened with the quiz and they need to try again, I can give that 1 student another opportunity to take the quiz and not open that up for everyone. I can also add additional time. So if your student has extended time on a test and you give the rest of the students an hour, I can give this student additional time, or completely remove the time limit and give them all the time that they need. Or I can just give them an extra time. So I like that feature. That's on the moderate button. The moderate button is only for this quiz. If I click this pencil under accommodations, this gives the students additional time on every assessment that you give. So if that student always needs an additional 30 minutes, you can give that to them, and it will always do that. You don't have to go into each individual quiz and modify it. So this is another great feature, a great way for you to get those testing accommodations met. So once you've got your quiz set up, you can preview what this is going to look like for students. Now remember, it's going to shuffle the questions and the answers. So if I click preview, the first question that comes up is actually an art question here, a matching question, and I can answer this question and click next and continue on through the questions. If I exit this preview and I refresh my screen and come into this preview again, it's going to give me a different question to start with. So now it gives me a different question because it's shuffling those questions and shuffling those answer choices for me. Now, the way I have this quiz set up is I do have a time limit set, so you can see at the top my time is counting down. If that's a distraction for students, they can close it and reopen that. They can also see their bar here. This tells me that I'm on question 1 out of 11, so this will help keep students on track. They can choose the answers here, and when I click next, it will allow me to continue on. Notice the way that I have this set up, there's no back button because I have this one set up where students cannot backtrack. They have to go through one question at a time and they cannot go back. So here I just changed the settings, and now as students are going through, they have the previous and the next option, and they can move back and forth between multiple questions. So once students have submitted their work, you will be able to see their information. This was a hotspot question, so you can see I got my mark inside the box, so I got it correct. These I missed, but you can see what was correct and what was incorrect throughout the quiz.